I'm so honored today to have on my coach, not only my coach, but one of the greatest coaches, not only in Ohio State history, but college football history, Jim Trussel. Coach, it's always good to see you and catch up with you. It's my pleasure to have you on today.
Thanks so much, Beanie. I'm so proud of you. I never dreamed when I think I met you in like ninth grade and you were a linebacker in our youth camp, and here you are on CBS. Wow.
My has times changed, most certainly. Coach, you've had some incredible honors in your career, and you're walking into one coming here soon, September 5th, at the Shoe, a house that you built, being honored into the stadium. Your name going to be forever etched in stone in that historic stadium. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you and what's that feeling like coming from Youngstown to Ohio State and, going and doing some great, amazing things for this university?
Beanie, every time I think of it, all I can think of is, that sign up there is going to represent, 10 years of guys like you, coaches, the fans that, encouraged us. All the people all the people behind the scenes, whether it's, Doug Callan taping your ankle or, Coach Lichter in the weight room with you or, whoever in the equipment, Louis Van Hoos in the equipment room. When you look at that sign, it represents a whole lot of people that, worked extremely hard for 10 years, worked like crazy to try to represent a wonderful university and make them proud. And now everyone that looks at that was a part of that. Heck, we had 10 different marching bands, the best damn band in the land, that are represented up there. So, it's pretty cool what all that represents.
Coach, most certainly is an incredible honor. And like you just said, it's not just one of those deals that, when I walk into that stadium, I'll see your name, but it's going to be so many incredible memories from your time at Ohio State and what you meant not only to the players, not only to the fans, but to everybody in the state of Ohio. I mean, you were that big. They will call you once upon a time the governor. And now, obviously, you're the lieutenant governor of the state of Ohio. Another incredible honor and a job that you do so well. So I thank you for that, Coach. But I want to ask, every time I walk into the Shoe, I get this feeling. I get a bunch of jitters, like I'm going to play a football game. How's it feel when you walk in that thing?
Beanie, mine was interesting. The first time I walked in the Shoe as an assistant coach for a game, all I could think of was that 40 years earlier, my dad was a running back in Ohio, much like you were in Ohio, and he was the Ohio Player of the Year. And he came to play for Paul Brown at Ohio State. And then ended up, after he graduated early, like people do even today, went and had spring practice. He had a great spring practice and then enlisted to go to war, World War II. And he never got to fulfill his dream of playing in that place. So the first time I walked in there for a game, all I could think about was that was my dad's dream to, play in that stadium, and it never happened for him. And here I was getting a chance to coach there. And now, as I think fast forward to, this coming, Saturday, to think about his name going up there, maybe it's his dream come true. I'm not sure. He'll be looking down, feeling good and proud and all the rest. And, we all have those personal feelings, just like those jitters you get, and you have memories of what's important to you. And, it's surreal, quite honestly.
Coach, I got to go back to the 2002 season. Obviously you guys go on and win a national championship, but you went and played some incredible teams that year, obviously beating the notable Miami team that was loaded with full of NFL talent. And then obviously you had some scares along the way. But when you think about that season, what's that one special moment that you had and you can sit back and say, you know what, I think we got something here?
Wow. Beanie, there were a lot of, we played 14 games that year. We played in the Kickoff Classic. Back then they had a preseason bowl game. That was against Texas Tech. And that was kind of the breakout for Maurice Clarett, had a big day. But in those 14 games, we won 7 of them by 7 points or less. And so there was like a breakout 7 different times. I mean, heck, we were fourth down and 1.5 to go, and we're losing to Purdue. And, they call it the Holy Buckeye, whatever. Craig Krenzel found Michael Jenkins, for a long touchdown. And some say that was the breakout. Others say, tough win, in the rival game at the end of the year. And then, the national championship game was double overtime. So, there was a lot of breakouts in that season. That was a special one.
Incredible journey, nonetheless. When you talk about all the players that you just mentioned, Maurice Clarett, Craig Krenzel, one of the things you emphasized during your time at Ohio State was pitting a bubble around the state of Ohio and not letting the talent get outside the state. And why was that important to you? And two, how does, Ryan Day incorporate that now into this model for Ohio State with the landscape being such a national and broad recruiting scale?
I think, Beanie, that's been a key. If you look at the last 25 years, I think we have more victories in college football than any university has. And I think it's in large part because we did create that bubble over the state. We have great high school coaching here in Ohio. We have great athletes. Playing at Ohio State means a great deal to them. Of course, we had great players from other states, but they kind of fell in love with the Buckeye way. And I think that's been critical. Coach Meyer, Coach Day, continued keeping that going. And Coach Day just mentioned to me not too long ago, he said, I think the number of guys that we're recruiting in Ohio is starting to go up. He said, we're on an upward trajectory. And we thought it was important. I remember recruiting you, Beanie, when you said, Coach, I'm going to visit Texas and USC. And I said, come on, Beanie, you got to stay home. And then, of course, all we had to do was talk to Mom. Right. Mom wasn't about to USC. But, we had to keep the great ones like you. Because, if the great ones come, some others will follow. And I think that's been a key for our success the last 25 years here at Ohio State.
No, I'm right there with you. I believe it's a strong point, and the success that we've had around here is getting guys that are homegrown and understanding that. Coach, you had so many great memories. Obviously, winning a national championship, going to multiple national championships, always dominating the school up north. But what's your fondest memory being at Ohio State? Maybe something that's a little bit personal to you that a lot of people may not know about.
I've answered that question often this way, and I believe it. The greatest memories is watching you guys and what you do later, especially being good fathers, good husbands. We see a lot of you guys on TV, and that's notoriety, but we have a lot of guys doing things that no one knows about that are making a difference in their communities. Many of them stayed here in the state of Ohio, which is wonderful for our state. The governor invited a bunch of our former players over for a little town hall meeting this past winter. And we had 99 guys come, and they were peppering the governor with questions, about property tax and roads and artificial intelligence and data centers and, all these things. And I was so proud of those guys, schools, because they were raising their kids. And so just watching what you guys do, and the success stories. I mean, I could single out so many guys that, it hasn't been perfect for any of us in our lifetimes, but we've had guys, handle adversity, come out the other end, doing extraordinary things, stay strong, become, great husbands and fathers. And to me, that's the highlights. We had a lot of games. We didn't win them all. We won a lot of them, got to play in some great games. But the future of what our guys have done and continue to do, that's our greatest victories.
Coach, I mean, it's so many things I could say, to that. And, one of the things that always impressed me with you is everybody you touched always will go back and be able to, have fond memories and can pinpoint a specific moment in which you said something or done something that have changed their lives forever. So, just being a former player, being an admirer of yours, I just want to say thank you, not only on behalf of myself, but all my former teammates that you've had the privilege of coaching, because we all appreciate you and that relationship that has been built outside of the game of football, as you just mentioned. So again, thank you for that, Coach. I want to ask another question, though, about the uniform legacy. Obviously, this year, Ohio State's had some new uniforms, and they're paying tribute to the past. How important is it for guys to, pay that homage to the players that have come before them this year in this day and age right now, to where society's a little bit different? These guys don't necessarily understand all of the great things that former players and coaches have done before them. But how important is it for your university to implement something like this to where they're paying tribute from a uniform standpoint, to the past guys?
I was kind of slow to the game on that one. When we started doing it a little bit back when you were there, remember we wore the 1954 national champions uniforms one time in the rival game. And then I think we wore the 61 team. And I was a little slow to that because I was a little bit of a traditionalist. I'm a little slow to fashion. That's why I'm still in a sweater vest. I haven't evolved too much. But I do think, to your point, if along with wearing that throwback uniform, if we are also doing a great job of teaching, what that team meant to us and our history. And I remember going into that 2002 season, we had our guys read the book about the 1942 national champions at Ohio State, and they learned what their history was and what kind of men they were. And I know when you guys were there, sometimes we would have you speak on one of your former Buckeye heroes, and you went and you did homework on them and stuff. So I think, teaching that history about, the people that built what you're standing on is really important. Plus, I think the guys today, they like that style. They like to be stylish. That's a big deal.
No question about it. Guys are always fashion forward this day and age.
That's right.
I want to ask questions about, this year's Ohio State team. Obviously, losing a bunch of guys in the draft, that's going to be a constant for where a team like Ohio State. They're always going to have a plethora of talent that go on to the next level. What's your thought process and what Ryan Day's been able to do with this program and how he's been able to stay at the top of college football with the amount of players that he has on a year-to-year basis that just go on to the next level?
I think one of the best things Coach Day has done is he hasn't apologized for wanting to bring in good people. Of course, he wants great players and he recruits top kids. But he first and foremost wants to make sure he brings in the type of person that can maintain the tradition and the excellence of Ohio State. And then I think the other thing that he's done a great job of is, let's face it, we always worked on building culture in our team, but you have to do it faster now because, like, I think Coach Day has 51 or 55 new players on his roster, and some of them, they're here for the first time. They don't even know that much about Ohio State other than the fact that, we've been near the top and send a lot of guys to the NFL, and they see a lot of our guys on TV. We're fortunate. A lot of guys like you and, all the people who are, on the television screen, but do they really know our history? And so you have to do it more quickly. And I think he's done a nice job of really integrating that history and that tradition and that responsibility of playing here. And I think he doesn't relax the high standards. He expects to win every game. I mean, that's bottom line. That's what he works toward. And I think he's put a great coaching staff together. I've really enjoyed getting to meet Coach Patricia. He was an NFL guy, so I didn't know him that well. Getting to know him, what a humble, thoughtful guy. I think he's got a great staff and they have standards and they hold people to them.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Coach, you coached some phenomenal receivers. Ted Ginn Jr., obviously at the top of that list, Santonio Holmes, Anthony Gonzalez, the Brian Robisky's, Brian Hartlines. But when you look at Jeremiah Smith, how good of a receiver is he, and how much will you have loved for him to be on one of your football teams?
It was funny. I was at spring practice the spring that Jeremiah came in, and I was standing over on the sideline near the end of practice, and we had just lost Marvin Harrison to the draft. And everyone said, oh, man, top pick or two, I forget which one he was. And I remember saying to Coach Day, I said, Coach Day, I know I'm a dinosaur, and I don't know the game like you guys do in today's world, but man, I don't know if you're going to miss Marvin Harrison as much as you think you are. I said, that number 4. I mean, I had some great receivers, and I'm not saying he's better than my receivers, guys that are watching. I'm not saying that. You're the best, but man, he's special, and he has turned out to be that. And his work ethic in practice, they say that his work ethic in the weight room and in the film room is extraordinary. Competitive guy. He was just voted captain. He's as good as he gets.
Most certainly. I think he's definitely probably going to go down as one of the top 3 or 4 wide receivers in Ohio State history once it's all said and done. Coach, I got to have some fun with you, so I got to ask some rapid fire questions really quick here.
Okay.
All right. And, excluding myself from this conversation, who was the hardest recruit that you ever signed?
The hardest recruit? Oh, man. The one that strung us on the longest, so I'll say that's the hardest, was probably Lawrence Wilson. He waited till like 4 o'clock on signing day and was going to do it on a radio. But, Terrell Pryor was hard too, because he promised his basketball team. He said, I'm not going to take campus visits because we're going to go win the state championship. I'm not going to get distracted. And so I'm not going to decide till March. And so we had to wait until like the first week of March, to find out that Terrell was going to be a Buckeye. I thought he was going to be all along, but until the ink is dry, you never know. So I wouldn't say it was hard though, because Terrell loved information. And think about how long ago this was. We used to fax him things, about, how you read coverages and, all this and that. And he was a sponge for information. So he wasn't hard to recruit. He loved the game. He had just made a commitment to his basketball team. He said, I'm not letting my college football recruiting distract us. He said, we won the state football. We're going to win the state basketball, and I'm going to stay tight with you guys. And if you think about what's going on in today's world, being, willing to stick with your guys through thick and thin is pretty darn impressive. And that's what he did. So he wasn't hard to recruit. Neither was Lawrence Wilson from St. V. But Lawrence made us wait and kind of hold our breath.
Coach, I always say Terrell Pryor is probably one of the most gifted athletes that I've ever seen in my life. Definitely one of the most gifted guys to come through Ohio State. So I can see, him being at the top of that list. So the next question I have is, who was the one player that got away that you absolutely wanted to be a Buckeye, but just chose for whatever reason to go somewhere else?
Wow. We didn't lose too many out of Ohio.
No.
I'm trying to think, and I'm sure we brainwashed ourselves when they went somewhere else. We said, well, we didn't really want them anyway. You know how that goes? Like when you ask the girl to the prom and she says no, I really didn't want to go with her anyway. Gosh, there's not one that jumps in my mind right now. I'd have to take a rain check and think. The big tight end, Rudolph from down in Cincinnati that went to Notre Dame. He was one that I would have liked to have a chance at, but he never even visited. So he not only got away, he went away in the middle of the night.
Yeah, Coach, you don't get an opportunity to, be one of only 3 coaches getting your name up there in the rafters by letting guys get away. So you did a pretty good job of securing the right talent for the Buckeyes. I want to talk a little bit about some things that you're doing in the great state of Ohio with the youth and getting kids in elementary schools and middle schools up to date on their fitness.
Yeah, Governor DeWine is got real simple philosophy. He wants every Ohioan to be healthy, and he wants every Ohioan to reach their God-given potential. And he said, why don't we start a fitness challenge? And why don't you see if you can get some of your guys to help? And so we've begun a fitness challenge, grades 3 through 8, and we're going on to our round 3 of it. And we've got 125, 130 of our former student athletes, not just Buckeyes, but other universities and men and women as well that go adopt schools. And going into this round 3, which begins here pretty quickly, we have 650,000 kids signed up. And it's not just fitness. You know, we make them set fitness goals and see if they can earn a bronze, silver, or gold medal, but also nutrition goals, because it's so important to learn about eating properly. We also have them create sleep goals, because it's so important to put those devices down and make sure you get your sleep. And then, of course, Beanie, you know, we're going to ask them to have quiet time, because we begin every day with quiet time, and we think about the things we're grateful for, and we want them to train their minds, because if you train your minds on the right things, you can handle the tough things. But if your attitude of gratitude is first and foremost. So they all have workbooks. They take them home. They work them with their families. And yeah, we're up to almost 80% of all 3rd through 8th graders have signed up to be on the Team Tressel Fitness Challenge, and having so much help. And we've also, Beanie, got about 300 teams here in Ohio from our universities, Division 1, 2, and 3, who have teams are adopting schools. So they're taking the volleyball team over and encourage that school. They take the football team or the basketball team. And so, you know, we don't say that it's just a challenge. We say that it's a movement, and, you know, better health habits, better future.
Coach, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming on. And again, congratulations on behalf of myself and, you know, all of Buckeye Nation and great state of Ohio. Honor well deserved. And you're doing an amazing job as Lieutenant Governor as well, Coach. So I thank you. And as always, go Bucks.
Thanks, Beanie. Go Bucks. And you look good on the air.
Thank you.